All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Dodd. I'm Chief Performance Officer at the Kentucky Department of Education. Thank you all so much for coming out on a very rainy night. We really appreciate it. Just a couple logistics. Well, normally I tell folks where the restrooms are. Where are the restrooms? Back on both sides. On both sides. Thank you. Exit either way. Either way. Okay. You'll see on your tables a small sheet. This is for questions. If you, during the session, some questions come up, you can go ahead and write them down on here. But know that at the end, we will be taking open questions. We leave usually about a half hour at the end for open questions. So this is a good hour and a half presentation. So settle in. The other thing that you will find is, that is really loud. The other thing that you will find is this QR code. So we have on here other examples of local accountability that you can just use your QR code and go out and look at other districts, but you'll be hearing from one tonight. Christian County is here with us, so we get to hear from them. If you want more details on the Framework 2.0 that we're going to be going over tonight, there is another QR code to go out and look at that. If you want to stay engaged with us after this session, there is another QR code that will give you some options for different ways to stay in touch with us and to help us with advocating for the new system. And then finally, you can also submit questions on that final QR code. So if you think of something, you take this with you. If you think of something afterwards, you're welcome to put it in there. We're going to be looking at these through February. We have town halls that go through the end of February. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the Commissioner of Education, Dr. Robbie Fletcher.
Thank you so much. I have one on. So I think we have word on the box blinking, so I may be switching over just a second. That being said, as a matter of fact, we saw some hydroplanes on the way in. So thank you for being here tonight. Hopefully, as we go through this process, you see what we do tonight, that you'll have a lot of questions as we go through, and also some wows. And one of the areas that when we're finished, and you're going to see, we're going to talk about vibrant learning. I'll go through the agenda in just a second. We're also going to use one district as some of their local accountability journey. So we do have a good substitute in for Chris Menzel. Superintendent Menzel did give me a call last night. He said, I can't be there. And I said, why? He said, I'm going to be a grandfather. So I said, I have to have picture evidence. So he did send me 4 pictures today. Beautiful young boy, Wyatt Lee. Ironically, the middle name is Lee. That's the commissioner's middle name. So he got bonus points for that. He kept saying it's named after him. I think it was named after me, but we'll take what we can get anyway. But Wyatt Lee was born, and so Dr. Ralston, I believe, is in the batter's box for us today for that. So we really appreciate it. Now, what we're here to talk about is a little bit about our process and what's been going on. If you've been with us throughout this process, you've seen 4 different prototypes. You've seen 2 different model frameworks. And part of that work has been to make sure that we're getting feedback. For example, prototype 1 was sent out. Pool council surveys were done. And even from very early on, some of the feedback we were getting talked about how do you, we want student growth. We don't think change is a good piece of our current accountability system. So 92% of the survey said we need student growth, not change. So we looked on to other pathways, kept on. Once we never asked that question again, because it's overwhelmingly positive that people wanted to see student growth. Where did you get the child? And where did you take them? So as you went through, there was a lot of pathways. It was in prototype 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it was kind of like, this is the way that we could go into it. But all along the way, there's been one statement that we've used to try to guide the work. And that is, as you see on the screen, to build a prosperous Kentucky, we'll launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all learners. And so many of us, one of the other ideas that kind of bubbled up as part of this work, and it came out with superintendents at the summit this past summer, was the idea of local accountability. In order to have an accountability system that is both meaningful and useful to all learners, I think we'd have to agree there has to be local accountability because we're a diverse state. What goes on in Livingston County is going to look different than what goes on in Paducah Tillman. It's going to look different for Murray State. I'm sorry, Murray Independent, Ballard, Lawrence County, Jefferson. So in order to have a true accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all learners, there has to be measures of local accountability to give districts flexibility to say, what's important to our local community? What does our local community expect of us? What's important for our kids? It's a lot more than just a reading or a math score. Now, you're going to see two parts of the accountability system that make up the whole. First, there's a federal piece that we'll talk a little bit about in a little bit. And then, of course, the local piece. So this is different. You're not going to find something like this. If you were to survey the entire United States, you're not going to see anything that's similar to this. But again, this started with school districts. This didn't start with KDE. So many districts have their own local accountability model where they do dashboards, whether it be on test scores or other items, and it's built from within. So how do we take that to where every district has their own local accountability system? The local accountability system and as a matter of fact, both parts of the accountability system has three big ideas. The very first one is vibrant learning. And there's so many examples of vibrant learning across the state. We're not saying this is a new idea. We're just saying that it happens at a high rate, as a matter of fact, but how we spread it to all districts. And some of you may be saying, well, what exactly is vibrant learning? The key word there is what's relevant to the student. To give you an example, I've used this example several times. In Eastern Kentucky, I'll say Lawrence County wasn't one of these districts, so I'm not bragging on the commissioner's former district or anything. But there were several districts that did something called a tiny house project. They got a $10,000 grant, and that money was invested to build tiny houses on trailers and sold. But part of the process was your engineering class designed it. Your carpentry class built it. Your electricity class wired it. Your art class painted it. Your business class managed the budget. And then at the end of the process, after one full year, those tiny houses were set to auction. And then whatever money was made went back to the school. As a matter of fact, one of those tiny houses was purchased by a gentleman from California. Got his truck with his tow package, drove all the way to Eastern Kentucky, picked up one of the tiny houses that he won in an auction, and drove it all the way across the United States, taking pictures of the tiny house at different landmarks and send it back to the kids that built it, send it back to that school. That tiny house is now on the Pacific coast, on a beach that this gentleman purchased, and he rents out to other people. But here's what's even better. A lot of those students in some of these schools went on to start their own tiny house businesses, building tiny houses for the local park system. You see how that's vibrant learning? Opportunities like that are happening across the Commonwealth. It doesn't have to be a tiny house project. It could be an apprenticeship. It could be internships. Or it could be just those project-based learning experiences that kids are having. But how do you measure that? You can't do it with paper or pencil, in my opinion. So we're asking districts to, however you're putting through this vibrant learning experience, how do you measure that? What's that look like? How do we share this? But also, too, as I've kind of touched on a little bit, the second idea is having the innovation when it comes to accountability. Yes, there's a federal piece that we'll talk a little bit about that addresses math, reading, ELL. It also addresses our survey, our culture safety survey. There's different buckets that are required within the federal system. And that is the system that's going to be used to identify your CSI, TSI, and ATSI schools. That needs to be uniform. It has to be uniform. But also, too, what about the excitement, the flexibility of local districts to add their own local accountability piece to that? But what does that look like? You'll hear some examples of different districts. I've heard of districts doing different things with their accountability model. As a matter of fact, one of the things that's not so much about student accountability, their community said, how are you spending the money? So part of their dashboard was they're including graphs on their local accountability dashboard to their community because they wanted to see how the money was being spent. But also too, there are things like student well-being. You have some districts that are measuring student well-being with student attendance in other areas, but also looking at what percentage of the students are involved in extracurricular and co-curricular activities. That's innovative. If you look at the data, if you're going to see have a student that's going to be successful, a good indicator, once they leave our doors, a good indicator of that is, were they a part of a co-curricular, extracurricular activity? Were they on the academic team? Chess club? Were they in a drama production? But how do districts measure that? And we're trying to turn that over to our districts. And of course, collaboration is so key that you work with your local communities. What do they expect of us? What are their expectations of you? How do we show that data to them? That's the highest form of accountability, folks, is what is expected from our local people. So those three big ideas, vibrant learning, accelerating innovation, especially through accountability, and also collaboration with local communities, and also with other school districts. One of my favorite slides, I'm going to have to kind of hurry up a little bit here. One of my favorite slides that we've had districts to present. You had Woodford County gave a slide of all the districts that they've collaborated with to develop their local accountability model. They had Clark County. They had Johnson County. They had Rowan County. They had Shelby County. I think even Logan County was one of the districts that they had been working with to develop their own local accountability model. And what does that look like? So collaborating across the Commonwealth because we want to lift each other up. Also eliminating colors. I'm not really worried about a red school, blue school, yellow school, green school. I'd like to see us collaborate more and more. And I think that this model really emphasizes that. Quickly, the flight plan. I talked a little bit before. A lot of this started even before 2021 with some districts doing this type of work, doing this type of what exactly is expected of by our local community. Lawrence County did participate in a listening tour where we asked our community, just tell us a story. What's your story about your experience? And more, we heard so much from our parents without guiding them. They said, thank you for the good test scores, for the improvement test scores, but we're not worried about that. What we're worried about is, are our students getting certifications? Are they going into the job market? Things of that nature. So thousands of teachers and people have been a part of this movement to build these local, we have 18 districts that are part of local laboratories of learning where they're building this vibrant learning, this type of experience with their students. And of course, the Kentucky United Learn Council was started, I think, in 2022, 2023, that really focused in eventually onto the moonshot of having this type of an accountability system. Like I said before, we've done 4 prototypes, 2 model frameworks. That's because we're listening. That's the point of the town hall tonight. What do you see? You're like, okay, Dr. Fletcher, this is awesome. This has to be a part of the accountability model. But you know what? We still have these type of questions. That's the same process that we've gone through to come up with 6 different, everything from prototypes to model frameworks. And then hopefully by 2026, after all these town halls, we'll have a model framework that we're ready to give to the General Assembly for approval. And again, just like I've said before, and Dr. Stafford will get into more detail about this, we are meeting the federal requirements. Everything that we're hearing from districts is we want to streamline the federal requirements as much as possible because, first of all, we do believe that math and reading we have to have a strong foundation in math and reading. There's been huge investments in that from the legislature. We owe them a return on investment. We owe our kids a return on investment. So that federal piece takes care of how do we identify CSI, TSI, ATSI schools. And also, too, one of the big questions was how do we provide timely instructional data to our teachers? They don't have to wait till the fall to get it. So we talked a little bit about interim assessments. But also, too, the second part is local accountability, allowing districts flexibility to determine with their community, these are the important items, and this is how we get back and report that to our local people. really customizing that to the community needs, but also collaborating with multiple groups. So that leads us for today's agenda. You got a great welcome from a great guy, maybe not such a great guy, but a guy that's got a great team. And we're going to start off by talking a little bit about vibrant learning. I think Callie's going to do that for us. She's done it once, done a beautiful job already. We'll talk a little bit about what exactly is vibrant learning. She'll give you a definition as developed by the Pool Council. Then we also have Christian County. Dr. Ralston will be here to talk about their journey in local accountability and vibrant learning. And believe me, every single one of these have been awesome. As a matter of fact, if we just did that piece and allowed districts to present, you wouldn't need the commissioner. You'd have a beautiful picture of what's going on in our districts. But two, we want to go into more detail about Framework 2.0. And I promise you there's going to be a 3.0 because we're listening about different parts of 2.0 that needs to be changed. You know, for example, the interim assessments, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. You know, we're talking about right now in 2.0, we're doing interim assessments that would replace MAPS or iReady, whatever system you're doing. But we're hearing from superintendents from districts, we really appreciate what we're doing with our system already. So can there be an opt-in part to this? You're going to hear the phrase opt-in, which is very new for us on what you can take and how we can help you. And then at the end, there'll be a question and answer session. So again, with that question and answer, we're doing wows and wonders. These are things, Dr. Fletcher, that we believe in, that we think is going to be great. They'll lead us into the future. But these are the questions that we still have. Have you considered this?
Okay, well, my name is Callie Colley. I'm a regional innovation specialist with KDE. I serve the districts in the West, so all the way from Fulton County over to Meade County, down to Allen County. So a pretty big area there. I am going to talk to you today about vibrant learning, but before we get into that, I want to just set our minds on something before we start. So go ahead and get out your phone or wallet or whatever you have a picture in and take out a picture of a kid that you really care about. So it could be your own child, grandchild, niece, nephew, a friend's child, a neighbor, and just go ahead and take that photo out. If you want to show it to somebody beside you, we all love to share photos of our kids. So here's some oohs and ahs. But while you're looking at that picture, I want you to think about that kid and how that child learns. What brings joy to them? Oh, clicker, sorry. Okay. What brings that student joy? What experiences would you hope for in that child's K-12 education? If you could craft their own experience in K-12, what would that look like? What would their teachers be like? What would they do at school every day? And what would they experience? So I want you to think about that and kind of frame your mind with that as we go throughout this presentation tonight. Before I start the definition of vibrant learning, I want to really give some examples alongside traditional instruction. So a couple of disclaimers here. One, this is not intended to say this is good, this is bad, or this one is right and this one is wrong. It is really just a look at a comparison between an approach to learning in the way that we're used to versus what could be and what already is happening around the state. Both of these examples are going to be grounded in the rigorous state standards, both the traditional and the vibrant learning examples. So still approaching the state standards, still grounded in the rigorous Kentucky academic content, but just two different approaches to learning. And we'll let you just draw your own conclusions about these experiences. So in this first example, students are learning about pollinators. And they read a textbook about pollinators. They read about it that's assigned from the teacher. They complete a worksheet based on the reading. Then they draw a picture diagram of a pollinator and label the parts. And then at the end, they take a multiple choice quiz that assesses them over all the things that they've learned about pollinators. Very traditional approach to learning. In this example, which is a real example from the state of Kentucky, These students also learned about pollinators, but they answered the driving question, how can we protect and support pollinators? They leveraged support from the community, both in their expertise and materials. They built a community pollinator garden, and they also were able to present their findings with these visual aids. And they also passed out bracelets and seed packets that they created to spread awareness of the support and protection of pollinators. The second example, very similarly, students were learning about human body systems. They read about human body systems in the textbook. They completed a worksheet, labeled different parts of human body systems on a diagram. They compared how body systems worked together, and they wrote a report on a body system of their choice.
Colored some pages too.
Yeah, maybe colored some pages. In the second example, which again is a real example from the Commonwealth, students took on the role as medical examiners. They had a driving question, which was, well, actually, they were solving the case of a real middle school student who was sick. And their driving question was, what is going on in McKenna's body that's making her feel the way she feels? So they had to research human body systems and gain information about those body systems in order to be able to work on their medical teams to be able to solve this case and put together a diagnosis based on evidence that they've collected. They use that evidence to then present to community members that are in the medical field, their diagnosis. And in this third example, most of us have probably read To Kill a Mockingbird, have written an essay on whether Atticus is a hero or not, using text evidence. And in this real example from the Commonwealth, students read the same book, but also used other texts curated both by the teachers and the students, fictional and nonfiction texts that they gathered evidence from to answer the question, what makes someone a hero? They use that information and information from the text to create a video with teams, collaborative teams. And in that video, they defined a hero, and they also provided, through the lens of looking at the book through the lens of history, provided some action steps that students could do to be able to stand up to injustice in their own communities. So all of these examples, again, are both approaches to state standards in different ways. But what are the differences that you saw in each of those examples, and which ones of those would you want for the child in the picture that you looked at before? When we look at the definition of vibrant learning, as defined by Kentucky United We Learn Council, it is learning that matters to students. So if you look at just some of the phrases in this longer definition, relevant, authentic, joyful, it honors students' culture, it honors their interests, their gifts. They create personalized products that are meaningful to them. Again, all of these things I would think are some of the things that popped in your mind when you thought of what you would want for your child as they go through K-12 school. This is a quote from a student in Spencer County. They did a project called Dream Home. And they had to do a scale drawing of their dream home. And then they took that scale drawing after working with community members who had expertise in the field, and they built a model, a scaled model of their dream home. And then they presented those to community members. They also had to look at budget and different things like that. And this was for a math class. If you look in her quote, it says, I like to experiment. I like to create things. I like to build things. But one of the biggest things in this quote that I like is she says, I've always loved math, but I didn't understand how building a house would be math. And so that we're bridging that connection between content and the real world. So she was able to make that connection of I'm doing something that I like to do, building, experimenting, crafting, being creative, but this is math. And so I think that's really important. That authenticity is really shining through in this example. So while teachers are around the state are crafting and creating these vibrant learning experiences for students, they're also preparing students for success past school. And a lot of districts are doing that through the Kentucky Portrait of a Learner. This example, or this on the board, is the Kentucky State Portrait of a Learner. And I love that this is a model and not a mandate for you to use. This is an example of what a portrait could look like. but 140 plus districts around the state are either developing or have developed their own portrait that is unique to their community. It combines academic knowledge with personal traits and skills, and it honors the whole student. And the portrait is really intended to answer the question, what do we want students to know, be able to do, and be like when they leave us? And not just leave us when they graduate, when they leave us every day. When they get on the bus, when they go to basketball, when they go home to their families, what do we want them to be like, to know, and be able to do? And so the portrait is a really foundational part of this work. When we look back at the moonshot, the goal of the moonshot is to create an assessment and accountability system that is meaningful to all learners and the communities that they are a part of. So with that, that gives us a sneak peek into the next part, which is local accountability. As Dr. Fletcher said, local accountability is popping up all over the state. This is a quote from Brian Kreisman, superintendent of Fleming County Schools. He says that it's designed by the people for the people it serves. It is transformative, it reshapes the learning process, and it really strengthens the bond between the school district and the community it's part of. We really hope that these local accountability systems will restore faith back into the public school system by really showing communities that we value what they value. Local accountability is where all stakeholders have a say in what matters to them and what is reported out. Because we know that in the past, some things that are reported back don't really mean anything to the grandma that's raising their grandchildren, or the person that really doesn't know a ton about the school system. They want to know important things, like some of the things that the commissioner was talking about earlier. So local accountability is a way to report out what matters to the community it's a part of. This slide has a QR code up at the top that has some examples of other local accountability models around the state. So if you want to scan that, feel free to do so. There's also a handout at your table that has some other resources that are available if you're interested in seeing dashboards or examples of local accountability around the state. You can see that. But we are in the midst of a movement. This is happening all over the state in various stages. So feel free to use those resources to see what this is looking like all across the state. I'll leave it up for just a second while you scan. So with that, I am really happy and excited to introduce Dr. Katie Ralston, who is here with Christian County Public Schools, and she's going to talk to us just about their journey to local accountability and where they are now and where they've been. And I think you're in for a real treat.
All right, thank you, Callie. Good evening. Perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Stafford, for having us here and giving us an opportunity to highlight the innovative things that we are doing in Christian County. And we're happy to be on the map a little bit and the opportunity to share, because we think we're doing really good things and we want you to hear about it too. So we'll be here. Ask us questions later if you need to, and you know how to find us at our email addresses. So we can definitely collaborate with you as well as I get through this PowerPoint presentations and you have any questions. So a little bit about us. Many of you know Christian County, but we do have around 9,500 students. We are about 30% African American, and we do have 60% economically disadvantaged students. We are a very large geographic district. When you drive across our district, it takes you quite a while to get from one corner to the other. And we have the schools listed here with some very exciting things that are going on with our high schools. You can see Christian County High School and Hopkinsville High School, our two traditional A1 high schools, and then our Career and Tech Center Gateway. But in August 2026, we will be combining those and consolidating all those into one building. That building is going up and under construction as we speak. We're very excited about it. And that building was built around the academy model. It has 4 wings that will house our 4 academies. And we are anxiously awaiting the finishing of that building, but at the same time also building an instructional model at the same time, getting everyone ready to do the things that we think align to the academy model. Also, we have 2 middle schools. We have 7 elementary schools. We do have a new early learning center. I'm very excited about that work, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. And then, of course, our alternative schools, they're listed at the bottom. But when I spoke with the KDE team and they said, hey, we really want you to come and speak about local accountability. And the first question was, what brought you to local accountability? So let me go back to 2021 when we rebranded our district. We all got in a room together. If you've been through that process of mission and vision making, you know it can be painstaking. And so we were poring over words, and we'd met several times, and we were thinking about a brand, and all of these things were going on. And as you do, you try to think of an acronym, right, for your school system, CCPS. And so we were sitting in a room, we were about finished, we created the mission, and we were trying to think of, P, like Christian County Public Schools, what aligns with P? We had come up with a community committed to, and then we schools was kind of obvious, but P, and we sat around, and finally one of our folks said phenomenal. And we looked at each other and thought, that's kind of silly. We kind of brushed it off at first. You remember that night? But then as we sat there, it grew on us. And we thought, you know what? If this is the vision for us, then phenomenal is exactly what we need to do. And we have truly committed to that over time and used that language with our students, about our students, and about the things that we're doing. And then this mission quickly followed. And I won't read it to you, but you'll see some of the language in there is very consistent with what Callie has mentioned and Dr. Fletcher already, and I promise that wasn't on purpose, but we are just aligned in that thinking. Meaningful learning experiences aligns right with that vibrant learning experience that Callie has been talking about, and I'll talk about a little more in a minute. But then the uniting all shareholders, that was critical for us. And so that local accountability question was easy to answer when I got it from this crew. So we have really made a very strong effort to bring in our stakeholders and ask them, what do you think? And how can we help you? And, you are the ones that we serve and you matter to us. And so a core need around that is definitely getting the right people at the table, the ones who have the right motivations, who are there for students, who know our students, who understand the accountability system that we are working under at the time. And so we are very, very intentional about who is sitting at the table. And we have long conversations about that. About their motivations and what they bring. And we don't always look for echo chambers either. We want the folks in the room who can push and challenge us. And so that has been a critical thing that has come out of this mission statement making that we did several years ago. So a few examples of that local accountability support. If you're familiar with the Pritchard Committee grant, Full Community Service Schools, that really does focus on bringing in families and community and getting their input, and has been a true asset for our high school, Christian County High School, Freedom Elementary School, and Christian County Middle School in our district. But that has just complemented the work that we already committed to in our mission statement, and has really been a wonderful mechanism to bring people together. Of course, I mentioned our high school transformation model and the career academy model that we're working in. So back in January, February of this year, we all came together and designed what we call the master plan. It's a great name, isn't it? Master plan. And so it really is. It's guiding us toward everything we need to do to get ready for this new high school. But in that master planning process, we had 55 people in the room, many of whom, about half, were community members, business and industry leaders, elected officials, pastors, parents. We also had a large group of students that they named Students with Voices, and they did have a voice in the room, and they were the ones who were the most impressive in that work. But that master planning process is a true example of local accountability and really bringing people together to say, what do we have as a vision for our students? What do we want the high school experience to look like? Out of that has come some impact teams. Those are kind of sub teams that meet out of that master planning committee to drive that work. We have several of those meeting all of the time. And the interesting thing about those is they are led by an internal leader and an external leader. So those impact teams all have someone like me leading the teaching and learning team. I also have someone from workforce development who co-leads with me as well and takes some responsibility for that teaching and learning team. And that has been an interesting process. And some insights to the language that we use and the talk that we have and the talk that they have, and how those collide sometimes and how times they really don't. They do miss the mark sometimes in the way that we speak and conduct our business. So it has been a nice compliment to the work of that master plan to have those extra voices with us. Out of that, also, we have a Christian County High School Steering Committee, and that has just gotten kicked off this year. That's about 20 people of key stakeholders in the community who can really be spokespersons for the work that we're doing with our transformation model for the high school. And so, like I said, we're just getting going with that, but we definitely have good representation from business, industry, and local community folks on our steering committee. Just yesterday, I wish I could have put pictures on here because it was one of our crowning achievements for the year, the second annual Career Expo. This is an event that is held for all freshmen. We call it a guaranteed experience. So all freshmen get this experience. And we had over 70 business, industry, and community leaders come and do exhibits for our freshmen. And so the Career Expo is a little different than a career fair. Those ninth graders aren't looking for a job. They're there to learn about jobs and learn about what is available to them in the community as they are about to select their career pathway. And then, of course, that leads into our career model and the new high school and all of those fun things that are going to come together for them. Those are big decisions for students. It was a great, great time. The second year is off much better than the last, even though the first year was excellent. I will say after last year's Career Expo, first time doing it, our data that we gave to students after they did that, we asked them to fill in a survey, said that 27% of students changed their mind about the pathway they were going to go into after the Career Expo. And our business, industry, and community folks were responsible for that, for students making good decisions about what they're going to do for their future, or maybe what they're not going to do for their future. They probably learned a little bit of that too. So that was yesterday. So we're all really tired today, walking around with sore feet. It was a very busy day. But that is a great example of that local accountability. And then, of course, our profile of the graduate, which I'll talk about on the next slide, is the reason I'm here, and our work with UK Next Gen, WKEC, and then just driven by a need in our district for community to tell us, what do you need for our students to be able to do when they leave us? And so I'll speak more about that in just a minute. We are also big believers in advisory groups. Student advisories are at all schools, even elementary schools. Even our littles sit on those teams, and tell their principals what they like about school, what they like about their experience. And we feel like that's a really important piece of information for them. But we also very much value our parent and teacher advisory councils. We have taken suggestions from them and really enacted some things that help with teacher retention. How they get paid for certain things. There's lots of information that comes out of those councils that we have utilized in our district. And then, of course, Freshman Advisory Council is another one that leads into that high school experience that has been very critical for that work. So just a few examples there. So I spoke about our profile of a graduate. Little bit of history here. I said we rebranded our district in 2021. At that time, we did start thinking about, Mr. Bensel said, I want this profile of a graduate. That's what we call it. Of course, the state calls it Portrait of a Learner. You hear different language around that. And so we began the research at that time, thinking about what could this look like for us? Who do we need to bring together? How do we get these competencies? What does it really mean for us in the instructional experience? And so you can see here the 6 competencies that we have promised our community that our graduates will have when they leave us. We devised those with a lot of input. I would say probably 18 months worth of sitting down with, again, our local business and industry leaders, students. I will say the word empathetic here and empathetic communicator, that word empathetic, that's a student-driven word. They said, we need that somewhere. And that was a, an aha for me. Like they're really smart and they have great ideas and they know what's important for them as well. We also had, administrators, teachers, lots of input on these competencies. But what's been the most fun about this process, once we got the structures down and everybody was over, that first year of like, wow, this is big and this is going to change things. And we're going to have to really think about this. We're now in year 2. It is a process. We are talking about what does vibrant learning look like for these competencies. You figured out how to do defenses and how to make that happen with all your 8th graders and your 12th graders. You have figured out how to do exhibitions of learning for your 5th graders. But now what does the instructional process look like to really make those vibrant? And so that is the conversation this year. That's the goal. And you can see over there on the right side there, the district expectations. Those are things we call tights. Actually, we have tights and looses. And so the district tights are every teacher teaches those competencies. And you can see the language, vibrant learning experiences. All of our 5th, 8th, and 12th grade students will experience an exhibition or a defense. Students in the grades in between are collecting artifacts and talking about those competencies. And then schools will engage in community partners in those exhibitions, defenses, or the learning experiences around profile of a graduate. So it is a process. It has taken us several years to get here. We're very proud of this work. We've been able to talk about this work with several different audiences. And so I'm just grateful to have the conversations with the people outside of our district who said, we need more than just science, social studies, math and all of that. Those are important, but these are also important and we need more. So very proud of Profile of a Graduate. To extend on that, though, the language that Callie talked about, I promise it was just a coincidence. We did not plan it, that this ended up on this slide, but we have been working around this definition of vibrant learning with our instructional leaders, with our students, and so that language has become commonplace in our district. And you can see here, next Friday, Christian County High School will have they're calling it a Vibrant Learning Day. Now, we know vibrant learning needs to happen every day, but for this event, Vibrant Learning Day there, gather experiences to include in your profile of a graduate portfolio. So basically, this is where seniors at Christian County High School will have a series of events happening, opportunities for them to go around and experience and learn about profile of a graduate and put those competencies in place. And so that language it's interesting how that conversation has spread out into our schools. And I love to see the creativity and the things that they do with that. But that meaningful piece really fits our mission and yours as well at the state level. Here's some examples of how that language has kind of become woven into the fabric of Christian County. And these are all social media posts. But you can see here, student voices matter. So there's a picture of our student advisory council that Mr. Bensel has and talks to them once a month and gets their input. That was actually just a couple of weeks ago. Our Student Life website has become very, very popular in Christian County. If you have not seen it, check it out. It's excellent. But they did post this vibrant learning piece from our Gateway Academy, and the Health Sciences Academy Body Structures class recently took a hands-on approach by learning by labeling the muscles of the human body there. And you can see them there with their skeleton and having fun with him. But they do talk about the profile of a graduate competencies in conjunction with vibrant learning, that they are accountable self-starters and career-ready professionals. Awesome hands-on experience there. Couple more from our elementary friends, the Vibrant Learning Spotlight of Mrs. Hodges' 3rd graders. taking science to the next level with hands-on genetics lessons. So that kind of fits with what Callie was talking about just a minute ago. Created offspring creatures for the day. And then another vibrant learning spotlight from our fourth grade students in Miss Coates' class, so that they are empathetic communicators. So we really make a strong effort to advertise these things. We want the community to be hearing about those profile competencies. We want the community members to be incorporating those profile competencies themselves. We actually, starting tomorrow, is our Vibrant Learning Profile of a Graduate Communication Push in February. So that starts tomorrow. And we actually have a billboard on our main road there through town that's going to have all of our competencies on there. So if you come to Hodgsonville, you'll see those posted right there by Jerry's Car Wash. It's great. So we do, though. We want the whole community to be seeing that language and understanding what that means when they see it posted. Okay, finally, next steps, transformation. And so there's always work to do, right? Always ways to improve. And as I mentioned a minute ago, that vibrant learning around profile for graduate really is something that we are working on and learning. We have talked about those adjectives, vibrant, meaningful, and joyful, and they're associated with instruction, not really something we heard in our pre-service classes all those years ago, at least for me. So it's a really long time ago. And so that has been an interesting conversation with our instructional leaders around that. Finally, let's see, journey to the high school transformation. Obviously, I spoke about that just a minute ago. That career academy model and getting teachers ready and students ready even for our new high school, our profile of the graduate competencies, bringing in community members, getting them really involved in those processes. And then finally, enable community connected learning experiences, getting our external partners in schools, talking to schools, talking to our leaders and our teachers and our students and being involved in all that. So just a few things going on in Christian County. We're not busy at all, but I hope that was enjoyable for you. If you have any questions, we're ready to answer them. And again, I appreciate you all, and I will turn it over to our next. Thank you.
Let's give Dr. Austin a hand, please. I jotted down, we hear a lot about defenses of learning and how districts are using those as part of their accountability model. And some of the things when we talk about vibrant learning experiences, I've listened to several districts, and this profile of a learner is awesome. There's a lot of great work into it. And I want you to notice something. Work started in 2021. The School Council didn't start till 2022, 2023. So a lot of this work began in districts long before we had an accountability of a moonshot of, in order to build a prosperous Kentucky, we want to build an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all learners. They've inspired us. They've inspired our School Council. These districts have inspired us to get here where we are. But listen to some other vibrant learning and other experiences before I go on. Was it last night? This is number 6 town hall, by the way. It's kind of getting a little confusing sometimes. But one of the vibrant learning experiences that was talked about in Bullitt County was a 3rd grade student who has already published 2 books on Amazon and is being sold. He's making money on it. That's part. Yeah, 3rd grade, a 3rd grader, a 3rd grade student who has published 2 books on Amazon as part of his vibrant learning experience, part of his journey, if you will, in Bullitt County. That's relevant. Another one I wrote down. Jefferson County has defenses of learning. They also have milestone experiences. Their defenses of learning, much like Christian County, happen at 5th, 8th, and 12th. But also other districts are doing these, that they have those defenses of learning. And then in those defenses of learning, you're having community members come in to sit in to evaluate students. Some of our 12th grade students are walking out with job offers from these defenses of learning. It's relevant. Shelby County and their special needs unit with some of their severe students. Their defensive learning is learning about processes. They bring in their parents to show them what they've learned. And one of the things that they did was they taught their parents how to make ice cream with a special needs unit in a defensive learning type setting. The other vibrant learning and a part of their defenses of learning, they do defenses of learning in Fleming County, but another thing that all their middle school students, all their eighth graders go through, it's a very intense interview process. They start off with every single student in the entire eighth grade goes in to do these type of interviews. It was seventh or eighth, I'm not sure, eighth grade. And then it gets narrowed down. They all get point systems. They have to go through and talk to different people throughout, and then they go through every single one does some type of interview. And then they go to the work the room event. I think it was 30 students walk into the room. They had the commissioner, the secretary of labor and education, had local business leaders. It also had the county judge, had state police, and they were just spread across the room. And they had to come in and they had 30 minutes to connect with as many people as possible in the room, introduce themselves, make a conversation, and get rated on their conversation and how many points they could get within that 30 minutes. They didn't meet anybody until they walked in the room. When you looked up, a kid came and shook your hand and they came and said, "My name is so-and-so. What's your name?" "I'm Dr. Fletcher." "What exactly do you do, Dr. Fletcher?" "Oh, I'm the commissioner." And then they would ask questions and I'd ask them questions and then I'd have to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. And then they had to accumulate points to move on to the next level. And it was called the hot seat, where they sat in front of a panel. I think it was 10 or 12. They narrowed down to 10 or 12. And then there was a hot seat. And then they went on to a national competition after that. These are middle school students going through that intense. Can you imagine walking into the room and seeing your county judge or your state police or your commissioner, even if you know what the commissioner is in middle school? I tried my best to let them know who I was in that time because I felt like I was being interviewed by these students. They were so good. But that's vibrant learning. Those are the types of things that we're expecting students to have. It's intense. It's meaningful. So that being said, we're down to this part where we're talking a little bit more about our accountability system. So again, a federal piece that we fill all the buckets, if you will. And when I talk about buckets, the data that we got from from people across the Commonwealth was we want to streamline federal accountability as much as possible. We want it to be uniform because it needs to be uniform in order to identify those CSI, TSI, ATSI schools that need our help. And again, as a principal of a former PLA school, it's a scarlet letter that hurts. It really does. But after you get past that scarlet letter to get that help, and you need that federal accountability piece in order to identify those districts. Also, too, how do you allow districts the flexibility to do these type of experience as part of their local accountability system? So I've set up Dr. Stafford to lead us through.
What will the world look like in 50 years? Can you tell me? Can you describe it? What will it look like in 50 years? Do you know? I'm getting laughs. I'm getting grins.
I won't be here.
It'll be a world without you. Can we even decide or describe it? We can't.
Boy, James will still be Superintendent Murray.
And we describe even what the world will look like in 4 years? We really can't because it's changing so quickly. Our world is changing so fast. But yet, that's the world that we are preparing our students for. Remember the picture Callie asked you to bring out from your phone? How old will your young loved one be in 50 years? That's what we're trying to prepare our students for now. My son will be at retirement age. We've got to give them the skills right now to be successful in a world that we can't define, nor can they. So we've got to think about how to make our students successful being collaborators, communicators, citizens, engaged citizens, creative thinkers. And that's what the opportunities that we're offering here in these intense experiences, like the commissioner just said. That's an intense situation that those students were in. Providing them those type of opportunities that they have to think, and they have to think critically, deeply, and engaging. Now, we're talking about assessment and accountability. Those are two different systems, two systems. Think assessments. When you think assessments, think about those tests. Think about third grade reading, fourth grade math, fifth grade social studies. Those are the tests. That's the testing assessment system. Separate from that is the accountability system. Although connected, it's a separate system. In that, an accountability system are those indicators of school performance. It's our graduation rate. It's our transition readiness. It's our reading and math scores. Indicators. So assessment and accountability, separate, but very related, very dependent on each other. So we're opening up those systems to provide opportunities and space for offering these vibrant learning experiences. We've heard very strongly we want to streamline that federal accountability system. Two separate systems, a federal system and a local system working together. Streamlining that federal system to make space for a local system where all these vibrant learning experiences can take place. Giving schools and districts the autonomy and the flexibility to customize their own local accountability system. It's something we've never talked about in Kentucky before. Having flexibility and accountability, that's new and different, what we're talking about. We've got the federal piece that will be standardized, because it has to be standard. It has to be unique or the same for every single school if they're going to be compared to each other. So that comparison to identify those schools in need of support, such as our continuous support and improvement, CSI schools, the schools of bottom 5%, the schools that need support, targeted support, that have those student populations that are performing as low as the CSI schools, and then those schools for additional targeted support, those ATSI schools. Those metrics, those identifiers, that system has to be the same. So we'll have a system that is uniform, but moving into a space that Kentucky's never been in before, where schools can tell their own stories and provide a platform in a way that you can celebrate the really good things that are happening in all of our schools, because there's good things happening in every single school. Two systems working together to communicate the success and those opportunities, and providing the flexibility that your community can come together and engage in conversations, trying to determine what is important for that community and what is in their local accountability system. Assuring that there is collaboration among the community. Dr. Ralston had a great example of a community coming together for the 9th grade Career Expo. Supported by the community, they brought together business leaders, faith leaders across them. And when we engage our community, students win, Schools win, districts win, and the community wins. That's vibrant and that's powerful. Check quote at the bottom of one of our slides. It said the greatness of a community, and I'm going to get this wrong, so the quote is on there. The greatness of a community was the actions of its members. It's powerful. The greatness of our community. Think about the people in your hometown or where you live or where you work. How many caring, genuine people that come together to help. And when they come together and help in the school system, how powerful and great that is. So looking toward that collaboration within business, chambers of commerce, faith leaders, students, parents, to help prioritize what's important for them and what they want in there. Because who better to identify the priorities in your local community than the people that live there? Also, building support and networks across the Commonwealth, moving away from those color ratings, doing away with those even in the local systems or in the federal systems, doing away from those and building networks of support across the Commonwealth so that schools and districts like Christian County, who have had experiences in developing their local accountability system, can help another district that's just starting their journey so that we can overcome obstacles or eliminate obstacles that they may have already encountered so that we're working collaboratively across the Commonwealth for the betterment of all of our students. That local innovation, engaging again with our communities and depending and giving that local choice and that local flexibility within our communities. Now, let's specifically look at what is our statewide measures and then our local measures. Now, with a little bit of feedback that we've got, a lot of feedback that we've got is this should be two pieces. The one in the top right in navy blue, and then the other two pieces are local. So the next time you see version 3.0, we have two pieces, not three. Okay, so the top right, the navy, statewide measures, that's our federal system. Now, there are federal requirements in our current Every Student Succeeds Act. If it remains the same, we'll have those federal requirements that include reading and math. That's our state summit of assessments. That's the spring administration. Okay, reading and math, grades 3 through 8 and 10 for that indicator of federal accountability. Now, those first 5 bullets are about accountability. The last bullet is about assessment. So reading and math is the focal. We're not running away from our rigorous Kentucky academic standards. We heard very clearly that our survey that 92% of our respondents said they want to do away with that change element that's currently in our system and go to an individual student growth. I'd say amen from that. That change system makes the current system very complex. Individual student growth would be on our reading and math spring summit of assessments from one year to the next. So think about taking our students from where they are and growing them. So from, for example, 3rd grade reading to 4th grade reading. 3rd grade math to 4th grade math, individual student growth. We've been there before. We've been there in previous systems. So going back to systems that include individual student growth. Now, the transition readiness and graduation rate would remain the same. Graduation rate would include both the 4-year and the 5-year rate that honors the efforts that the students give and that persistence to graduation that the students, their parents, and their educators have put into that graduation. Our English learner progress would remain the same and is currently on the access test. We're actually testing now. Chris is here with us, and she's been dealing with access, and we're almost to the finish line. So it remains the same. It remains the same because of the importance of acquiring that English language. The survey, the climate and survey, as on one of Dr. Ralston's slides, they had on the vibrant learning experiences, they had student voices matter. And that's what we heard. We heard very clearly that student voices matter, and that survey was desired to be kept. In version 1, in framework 1.0, we had science in accountability instead of the climate and safety survey. Because again, we're not running away from our standards. But we heard very clearly, as she did in Christian County, that student voices matter. And so in version 2.0, the climate and safety survey would be part of federal accountability. Okay, so those are the 5 indicators of federal accountability. That 6th bullet there, the science assessment, is a statewide measure, but not in accountability. ESSA requires that science be administered statewide and reported. Doesn't say anything right now about accountability. Our state statute does. So our state statute says it's to be in accountability, but not federal. So that's one of the legislative changes that we would need.
If I may add.
Please, sure.
Maybe.
Here.
One of the things when you think about this, probably the easiest way to think about it is a formula. You know, the reading and math, the individual student growth, the transition readiness, graduation rate, English language progress, and the climate and safety survey, very similar to what we have now, would be a formula that goes together in order to label and identify those CSI, TSI schools. Science assessment will not be part of that formula. You know, we all agree we have some issues in science. We have curriculum issues, we have assessment issues, we have things that we need to address. So by pulling that science part out, that allows us to address those. As a matter of fact, we already have some, our science assessment will look a little different even in the spring. So with that being said, that gives us some time to, okay, how do we get a better science assessment for our students? We still have to, it has to be uniform. That's a federal requirement. It has to be reported, but it doesn't have to be part of the formula, if you will. So it'll be reported separately. So again, those first parts, part of the formula, if you will, part of accountability. The science assessment is just that. It's an assessment that's pulled out that we are federally required to give. It has to be uniform. It has to be reported. And again, we have work to do in science. And I'm talking about our assessment, our curriculum, and everything in between. So again, that's the streamline. And I don't think we could streamline this anymore on the federal piece because there's certain buckets that have to be filled. The reading and math fills a bucket or a requirement. The student growth fills a bucket. The transition readiness graduation rate fills a bucket. The English language, each part of those fills a federally required bucket, if you will. Okay.
Thank you. And now let's switch to and talk about local accountability. So there's going to be a few requirements to be in the local, but there's going to be some choices. So within the local accountability, social studies and writing would be a requirement to be in your local accountability system. So now the choice would be, and that's the reason it's a choice measure, the choice would be that schools could, and I'm going to use a new term from Kentucky, schools could choose to opt in to the social studies state assessment, or they could develop their own competency-based, authentic demonstration of social studies and writing.
Could be tied to your profile of learning.
Yes. So again, the choice would be up to the local district because districts are in different places where it comes to developing their own competency-based, authentic demonstrations of learning. Now, the emphasis on social studies and writing would be that another change would be that it would be assessed and reported grades 3 through 10. So again, we're not shying away. We're not saying it's not important. Actually, it's very important to provide those experiences in social studies and writing. So grades 3 through 10, you could either take the state provided, you could opt into that, or develop your own. Another choice measure is your vibrant learning experiences. We've heard, again, multiple examples tonight about vibrant learning experiences. The Kentucky United We Learn Council Accelerating Innovation Standing Committee created a menu of options of vibrant learning experiences, included capstone projects, defenses of learning, multiple different menu options that districts could choose, or they could develop their own. Now, you could start out with, as an option for your local accountability, the choice would be yours, so which one of those. You could start out with a percentage of students engaged in those type of activities, just the percentage. If you're more advanced in those type of vibrant learning experiences, you can go then to the performance of the students and the quality of the student product. So required to be in your local accountability system, but choices and choice measures there. The last choice measure we'll talk about, and this is where we've got the most feedback on version 2.0, and that's that interim assessments. So we're offering in 2.0, I'll tell you what is in there now, and then I'll tell you the change that we're anticipating in 3.0 because of the feedback that we've gotten. Right now, interim assessments in 2.0 would be required to move to a state-developed interim assessment system. Have an interim assessment for the fall and an interim assessment for the winter, developed by the state based on the Kentucky academic standards that would align to that summative. So it would be the same vendor, the same type of look as the summative assessment. What we've heard, and what Dr. Fletcher's probably good enough to tell you right now, is that superintendents, we've heard very clearly, do not want to give up their math, their STAR or I-ready.
And that was part of it. Yeah. There you go. One of the things with the interim assessments to think about is we've talked about what exactly does this look like, because we're required to assess grade level standards. So those interim assessments would have a grade level score wrapped around it. And I guess these are math and reading. Let's be very clear. Let's turn all these off. And then wrapped around it would be that flexibility, that adaptability piece, because we want to be able to determine what grade level students are. Because let's face it, when we tell a parent that a student's proficient, can we really define that? I mean, we can, based on, when we pull in all of our teachers to talk about what proficiency is, but how much better would it be to be able to say, okay, this is proficiency on our state standards, but your child is reading on a 4.7 grade level. Wow, that means something. So to the parent, that means so much more to say, well, what percentage of our kids are on grade level? So if those interim assessments, which many of you already use interim assessments like math, I-ready, STAR, they give those grade level equivalents. And so what we're trying to do is give that same level of instructional data, that same type of information to you if you wanted to use the interim assessment. So that would be the opt-in, if you will. So we heard from some superintendents, in one of our surveys, 67% of the people surveyed said they'd be willing to give up their interim assessments to take on the state interim assessments. Now, keep in mind, the summative cannot change. The summative, you don't have the option to opt in on summative because that's the federal piece. That has to be the same. So what we're trying to do in order to get instructional material, instructional information back to our teachers more quickly is have an interim system, an interim assessment system that aligns with that summative. And here's another piece. One of the reasons for having the summative assessment and growth from third grade to fourth grade, and we've had people say, why can't we just look at the very first, the fall semester and compare it with the end of the year? It'd be very easy to bottom out the first one and get a growth measure. We don't want districts to feel that kind of pressure. We don't want a teacher to feel that kind of pressure. The other thing that came out too was, have we considered, and this is something we've talked about, we haven't really emphasized a lot, what type of resources could be available to teachers in this interim system? Is there an instructional pathway for a student that's given after giving an interim system? So what we're talking about is we have to do an RFP and say, this is what we expect of our interim assessments that are aligned with our summative, and then we would have companies bid on it. We don't have a company selected. It could be Curriculum Associates, it could be Pearson, it could be NWEA, or anyone, anywhere. But these are the correct characteristics. These are the things that we want in our interim summative system and allow these vendors to bid in. Now, the other thing is we'd have to have a commitment from districts, probably for 2 years, because think about the budgeting process. I'm going to talk about seat shortfall tonight, or at least until probably somebody interviews me about it. But with that being said, we'll have to know how many districts want to opt in, so that would have to be a part of it. What's the cost? So we'd probably have to have a 2-year commitment from districts. And some districts may say, you know what, we're going to hold off the first 2 years. We're still going to use our iReady, our STAR, and that's fine. But notice this is a different mindset to have opt in. And the other thing I think was brought up at Greg, is there some way that we could do an aligned system K through 8, not just 3 through 8, so that that vendor would provide you information. Still, yet K1, 2 would not be a part of accountability. It would be assessments that you could use within your instructional pathway for students. So again, what does that RFP look like? And well, again, we want input from different people throughout the state on what that does, and making that interim assessment system aligned. And again, if you use our system, what we would recommend to the state legislature is we pay for it. If you want to use yours, you pay for it. A little bit benefit there. And of course, who knows what legislators, they may jump on board on that. We'll see. But again, to have this opt-in to help with instruction, as opposed to this is an accountability assessment, is different. It's different.
And the last piece of the local would be, again, engaging your local communities in defining what the priorities are for your local system. That would be connected to and aligned with your portrait of a learner. So we've heard, again, some examples of what those things could look like. We have some districts looking at how the percentage of students that are in co-curricular or extracurricular activities. We've also heard from districts that says that they want to prioritize like accreditation or micro-credentialing that their students are attaining. So it would be, again, the priority and engaging your local community in making those decisions. So we're looking at, for this, continuing to gather feedback, continuing gathering input, developing a 3.0, continuing that iterative process that we've been engaged in, developing this. Then have legislation for consideration for the 2026 legislative session. So a year from now, next legislative session, have legislation for consideration that the General Assembly then can come and and take action on. So past that, then we're looking at districts and schools that are in various places. Dr. Ralston talked about an 18-month process to develop her portrait of a learner, her portrait, she calls it portrait of graduate. So 18 months to drill one piece. So it's going to take a while for districts who haven't even engaged in this type of activities to get on board and to develop the capacity for that. So we're going to need to pilot it. We're going to need to bring districts together. Again, that collaboration piece, so where we can learn from each other. Then from the piloting phase, then expand that to even more districts, and then sustain it statewide. So we're talking about legislation for consideration in 2026, then multiple years of building the capacity in our leaders, our schools, our communities, and our students for these types of systems. So before I turn it over to Dr. Fletcher, I'll leave you just with one thought, is that you're here tonight because you are interested in education. You're interested in being here because of your commitment to education and to the students in our Commonwealth and to that particular loved one in your phone. So I encourage you to continue that engagement, continue the conversation as we work toward these new systems.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Stafford. There's one other piece that I want to talk a little bit about that honestly, and I'll just be full transparency. When I kept reading the words accreditation style in some of the prototypes, I was in the corner in the fetal position because I was hearing program review. I was hearing things like, oh, wait a minute, is this writing portfolios? And so those discussions that we were having was, what exactly do we mean by accreditation style? So I'm going to tell you. One part of this is having that third-party evaluator come in to identify exemplars. For example, defenses of learning. We want to identify districts that are doing an exemplary type process for their defenses of learning so that other people can learn from it. We want to identify districts that maybe have exemplary type apprenticeship programs so others maybe can learn from it. What are some exemplary type, maybe collaboration with communities that are going on that we can identify? What are some exemplary ways that people are meeting equity issues? And how do we make sure that we put that out there so that you have that outside third-party evaluator come in to identify the exemplars? Again, we'll always walk away with suggestions, but we're not here to tell you your local accountability is valid or it's not valid. Now, if there's some issues, we'll talk a little bit more. But overall, what we're wanting to do is to really identify the exemplars so we can connect you with others. Can we connect you with, for example, it makes perfect sense that maybe smaller independent districts work together to develop these because they have similarities. Or maybe the larger districts, for example, maybe Christian County can continue to work with some of the surrounding districts, maybe Christian or along with Woodford County, Shelby County, and others to refine their system. The other thing too that Dr. Stafford pointed out, this is going to take time because, for example, Woodford County, who's been working on this for almost 2 years on their accountability system, they don't feel like it'll fully be implemented until 28-29. So that's the point of that ramp up system or ramp in system, so that piloting phase for districts that are ready now for that local accountability piece. And then moving into expanding that to other districts till finally having all districts that have that local accountability piece. Now, a group that we've talked a little bit about along the way has been the Kentucky United Learn Council. If you're a member of that, would you please raise your hand if you're a member of the Kentucky United Learn Council? Anybody in here part of that? I'm part of that. Okay. So, but with that being said, we started off with 75 individuals that started a lot of this work and putting together pieces and hearing and listening to other people and looking at the great things that are going on and then moved it to this point. So you can see where we are. We've done through prototypes. We've had 4 different prototypes. We've had legislators as part of the Cool Council too. I think our last Cool Council meeting, we had 4 different legislators there, including Max Wise, including Tipton, Bojanowski, Truitt. Is that all of them? Is that all the ones?
Deneen.
Oh, all 4 of those were there.
Deneen.
So we're very thankful for that.
Deneen.
So we've gone through a study phase. We actually sent model 1.0 to the Kentucky Board of Education. They gave us feedback, and that's where we're at 2.0 now because the Cool Council and LSAC also came in and said, you know what, we need that science pulled out and we need that student voice piece put in there. So we're listening. And then we also talked to the Kentucky National Learning Council. We're in hopes of it. We continue to engage our legislators now. We've been talking to them all along. As a matter of fact, we have one legislator said, hey, can we go ahead and incorporate growth now? And we've been working on legislation to go ahead and incorporate growth. 92% of the people support it. Let's see what we can do with it. Now, let me clarify a little bit. That growth model, we can't automatically just whip one out. So we're going to probably have to fall back to what it looked like in 2017. Utilize that model to bridge to a better growth model when 2026 comes around. So again, the growth that we'd add in would be, very thankful that they've approached us about this. And then there's other benefits too, when you look at that having a growth versus change. In the change model, your ELL population is part of your overall fully in year 2. With growth, your ELL students take the test 1 year. Second year, they're part of the growth model portion. And then the third year, they're fully into your accountability system. So it gives you 3 years to onboard those students into the accountability model, which makes more sense to me. It's only fair. So that being said, we want to have that opportunity for advocacy and for talk. Also, to always go back to that, to those students. What type of experience do you want your children to have? I witness all the time where I go into districts and see this vibrant learning type experiences that are happening across our Commonwealth. How do we work together to expand that? And I'm telling you, every time I listen to a district and their vibrant learning and their local accountability, I kick myself. Why didn't I think about that in Lawrence County? That's a great idea. Why didn't I do that? Well, now, if we build those teams in collaboration together, we expand those type of opportunities. And we don't have to worry about a color rating because we're here to lift each other up, not worry about whether you're yellow, blue, green, or otherwise. Now, on the other hand, we've talked to some districts, they say, you know what, we like to have that rating system. Well, you still have the federal piece. If you want to put out that type of information, and there is one of our fellow superintendents, every time the state comes out with that numbers, Jason Boer, we all know Jason, he usually ranks them, sends them out to us. I've given him a hard time about that. I've talked with him. I need to apologize. But anyway, you still have that part if that's what you want. That's not going to be our focus. Our focus is how do we connect you with others to lift each other up. How can I stay engaged? QR code, is that also in the sheet that we have too?
Yes.
So there's some information here that's also on the page that you have. But now for about 2 or 3 minutes, I'd like for you to turn to a table partner and say, okay, these are the wows. So these are the wows. Maybe these are the wonders, the questions that we have. So take about 3, 4, 5 minutes to talk about the wows and the wonders that you have moving forward. Starting now. Just a few minutes, or actually, let's say 30 seconds. While I'm thinking about it, and since Ms. Knopps reminded me, there should be a sign-in sheet on your table. Please make sure you signed in. Please make sure you signed in. And we'll come together in 5, 4, 3. You guys are a lot better than Greg, let me tell you. You guys, you just took to 3. Ovek went all the way to 1. You guys are ready to 3. All right, with that being said, there's one story that Dr. Austin has to share, talk about vibrant learning experience.
Put me on the spot here. I didn't plan. I told him if I'd had more time, I would have shared a story from one of our defenses as we were talking about student stories and the things that we learned about students through this process. And we had a student named Caleb who wasn't real sold on profile and about doing this defense. But this student came in. He's not a college-bound student. He is somebody who's going to go out into the workforce. And he works on drones. He works for a local company for his work-based learning experience, and they work on drones, and he is very good at it. And he actually has to step out of class and take calls sometimes from people all around the world about these drones. And if you've seen them, I mean, some of them are massive, and just very complicated pieces of machinery, and they don't know they're speaking to a 17-year-old. They just know this guy knows what he's doing and he can help me get my machinery up and going. And so when he came in and he told that story and he engaged with the committee, and we had community members on the committee, we were also blown away by that story and many more, by the way. He walked out of there so proud of his work, and he really was not sold, and went home and told mom, and, puffed up chest and really proud, and understood then the impact that he was making in the world already. Mom happens to work with us, and of course she marched right down to the office the next day and said, Katie, what? I didn't know what this profile thing was. I was kind of poo-pooing it, actually. We were at home talking about it, going, what? And I gotta get up and stand in front of people? She said, I get it now. He is so proud of himself, and you all made him proud of himself in that process. So it really was a success story, but there's a lot more, honestly, but that was one that we love to tell, and that was really powerful.
Thank you. And again, work-based learning opportunities that's relevant. I mean, have to step out of class to take a call to help the business as part of work-based learning. Wow. Okay. Wows and wonders. Wows and wonders. Over here.
Dr. Fletcher, when we talked about the opt-in for social studies and writing, and you mentioned even K-8, what would that look like, excluding K-2 for accountability? With the districts, if they choose to opt in, would they have would there be flexibility in the grade levels that are chosen for the assessments for social studies and writing?
It's 3
Right now it's 3 through 10. It is 3 through 10. We talked about that we want to do grade level bands, or will we do 3 through 10? And right now in 2.0, it's 3 through 10. Back.
On the writing part, are we going to move away from on-demand writing to more authentic and content writing? Or are we going to stay with the on-demand writing model?
That's up to you as a local accountability model, unless you opt into our assessments when it comes to the 3 through 10 writing. So how should it look for you within your local accountability model? Some people may want to do writing portfolios. Maybe that's it. Or there may be other ways you demonstrate that writing through your profile of a learner and your defenses of learning. So again, having as much flexibility as possible within that local accountability model to assess writing how you think is authentic for your children. Other wows or wonders?
Another wonder. I'm loud enough.
Well, this is for the camera. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just a wonder that we have discussed, and came up in one of our focus group meetings as well. If the local district decides on a local measure instead of opting in, what process will be in place to verify that those are quality measures? I mean, is there going to be some type of process to have those reviewed and approved, or we think it's good enough, so it's good enough?
What we're looking at is having different parameters, but when it comes to the things that you identify, leaving that up to you as much as possible. For example, if we have an external evaluator that comes in every third year, they can give us some suggestions or give you suggestions, But again, that local accountability piece giving you as much flexibility as possible. Anything you want to add to that, Jennifer?
I would just add, we've had some similar questions about equity across the Commonwealth. And what we are really going to look toward is our co-ops and developing some networks and professional developments around those type of things. We actually talked about too, developing some guidance documents that would help with that level of rigor and expectations from the department level as well.
And notice we say guidance documents to help. Others.
I just had a question about the math and reading tests. Just curious if there are plans to write new tests or stick with the current test that we have now, assuming the standards don't get majorly changed if they get revised. I understand if we had a big revision, we'd have to change the test, but one of my interests is that the more we can stay consistent on the test, even if the accountability system changes, if we can stay consistent on the exam, that often can be helpful and more efficient, I guess, for the district. If we're going through developing a graduate profile and other things like that, and teachers are having to relearn, what's expected, sometimes it could save money, and it would also cost less time if we could somehow keep the test consistent.
And that's one of the things about what we're trying to do with the test is have some flexibility. When I say, I should say adaptability. Still have those core portions, that core grade level content being assessed, but also having that wrapped around so we can say you can actually assess grade level higher or grade level lower, so that you can say this student's a third grader, they're proficient on the grade level assessment, but they demonstrated that they're on a 5.2 grade level. So we would put that out to a vendor and have that type of an assessment. That's one of the requirements we would ask for. So still having the same standards, having that core, but also too that flexibility and that adaptability so that you can get that grade level equivalency.
The only piece that I would add to that is that, that there is a legislative requirement that the standards are revised. So if there are major revisions to the standards, then the test has to follow.
Understand. And something else I'd like to say is the goal I would love whenever I walk out of this role is for us to have an assessment system that stays consistent, or at least while I'm the commissioner. And that's why we want to streamline down on that federal piece. So if the federal changes, we can't help that. We would change it with it. But if you want to change your local accountability system because, I don't know, maybe you have a new business or something that moves into your district that you want to cater around that's up to you. You could have a more nimble system. You could develop that. You make the changes in your own local accountability system. You don't have to wait for a new commissioner to change your local accountability system. That's up to you. So again, if we streamline down to those federal pieces, we're hoping that'll promote longevity for a while to come. And of course, who knows what the next executive order will be, but again, that's our hopes. And I'll tell you, even if you take out the federal requirements, I believe in this accountability model because one, you have the standardization piece where you can identify schools that need that assistance, that need help, that we want to help, or CSI, TSI, ATSI. We want to be able to have that consistency, but also two, flexibility where you can grow your own.